Hey guys, it's Christa Watson here from Christa Quilts, back with another fun video tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I machine quilted my modern logs quilt. I'm quilting a very simple stipple design, but let me tell you a little bit about my sewing machine setup. So first of all, I'm using a nice big table that has a drop-in with an insert so that I can fit my sewing machine flush with the height of the table. This really helps me quilt and it saves a lot of wear and tear on my body. The next thing you'll see is that I'm wearing some specialty gloves that help me push the quilt through the machine. There's lots of different brands out there, so play around and try different ones until you find something that you like. I have an extra little table set up to my right, which holds my water and some extra handy notions. And although you can't see it, I have another little table set up to my left that helps hold the weight of the quilt. I'm free motion quilting with my feed dogs dropped, and I'm using my favorite machine, a Bernina 770 QE that has lots of space to scrunch and smush the quilt. However, any machine will do as long as you have a go-get-'em attitude. Don't forget to purchase a specialty free motion foot specifically made to fit your machine. As you can see, I've started quilting on the right hand side of my quilt because I find it a lot easier to work my way from one edge to the other across the quilt. Take a look at the quilting plan that's included in the Modern Logs pattern. You basically start on the right hand of the quilt, either up in the corner or perhaps on the side, and then work your way around the quilt block by block. For some bonus practice, I recommend drawing out your design on paper to get a flow for the design and then practice quilting it on a sample before you actually quilt your real quilt. If you time yourself while quilting one block, you'll have a good idea how long it'll take to complete the quilt. Now let's take a look to see how I form the actual stipple design. It's also called a meander, and you can quilt it on any scale, small or large or anything in between. Now the stipple isn't really that difficult. It's just a series of bumps moving your way, meandering all the way around the quilt. When you're using a nice busy fabric, it can help blend so you won't see the lumps and bumps and little mistakes you might make. Don't worry about getting your lines perfectly even or perfectly round. You're aiming for texture over perfection with this design. Your hands act like a hoop holding the quilt in place. If you feel like you're starting to get out of control or starting to reach, you can stop with your needle in the down position and move your hands. Or if you need to, you can gently move your fingers and walk them around as you quilt. It takes a little bit of practice, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll become, and it'll be like second nature in no time. As you may or may not have noticed, on some of these fun fabrics that I design, I'm often inspired by my machine quilting designs. It's fun to quilt a stipple on top of a stipple-looking fabric. For machine quilting, I'm using a light yellow thread from my Aurifil Piece and Quilt collection. This is 100% cotton, 50 weight, and it comes in a nice large spool that's plenty of thread for the entire quilt. The best thing about using this cotton thread is that I can use it for both piecing and quilting. Because I like to design colorful, busy fabrics like my Good Vibes collection shown here, I want to make sure that the quilting I do is going to show up and add lots of great texture. One of the reasons that I love to spray base my quilts is so that I don't have any pesky pins getting in the way as I stitch. That comes in really handy when I start to scrunch and smush under the machine. Now I've pulled back so that you can see me in action. I'm sitting in a comfortable chair and I have that little table to my left that can help hold the weight of the quilt as I scrunch and smush it through the machine. I've worked my way block by block, row by row. I'm almost to the middle, and once I get to the middle, I'm going to stitch off the end, cut my threads, and rotate the quilt. It's a little bit like playing tug of war or arm wrestle to shove the quilt all the way around, but you notice I've quilted one part of it and now I'm turning the quilt 180 degrees. So the area that I just finished quilting will now be on the left side. Once I start quilting again, I'm going to be in the middle and I'm going to work from the middle to the right hand side of the quilt. I'm picking up again where I left off, and if possible, I always want to stitch to the edge of the quilt whenever I'm starting and stopping, especially on an overall design like this one. Now, if you happen to run out of bobbin while you're stitching, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, if you have a low bobbin indicator light, try to stitch off the edge of the quilt and put in a fresh bobbin. However, if you run out while you're stitching, no problem. You can just stop stitching, put in a fresh bobbin, take a few stitches in place, and keep on going. Whatever you need to do to get the job done. Notice that I'm continuing to scrunch and smush whenever I need to get more of the quilt through the machine. You'll notice that I'm not using any kind of specialty tools because that would limit me. I don't try to fold it or roll it or anything like that. I literally scrunch it in my lap, throw it through the machine, whatever I need to do, and reposition my hands. In fact, you'll notice as I'm stitching that I probably stop and reposition a lot more than I'm actually quilting. Just remember, you're only stitching that little area in between your hands, so lots of stopping and readjusting is necessary. Just be sure to stop with your needle down and anticipate your next round of stitching so your design can stay nice and smooth. Now that you've got the hang of my scrunch and smush method, I'll go ahead and speed this up a little bit so you can see how I get more of the quilt done. Again, I'm just working one block at a time, keeping track of my bobbin and when I'm going to need to change it. If you know how many blocks you can quilt on one bobbin, then you can anticipate when you'll need to start and put in a fresh piece. Again, don't worry if you have to start and stop and shift. All of that is fine. Make sure you get up and take breaks, keep water at your side, and keep on going. I'm continuing to move my way across the quilt to my right hand side, and when I'm done, I'll stitch off the edge. Sometimes I might go up and back and down and diagonal, whatever direction I need to stitch to get it done. Here's another close-up showing how I perform this meander stipple. Just relax, drop your shoulders, and maybe listen to some nice music. Try to find your zen place or your happy place while you're quilting. I like to zone out and think about what I'm going to do for the day and enjoy every stitch of the process. Now, if you find yourself stuck in a corner, it's okay to stitch on top of a previous line of stitching to get your way out. Again, when you're using fun, busy prints, you're not going to notice any of the imperfections. I really love the feeling when I'm to the last row or two of the quilt. Now all of the bulk is to my left and I only have a little bit of the quilt that I have to deal with. Again, the most amount of bulk you ever have to deal with is only half of the quilt. So the more room you have to spread out, the more room on your machine, the easier it is to quilt this quilt. Just remember, when you're stitching super close to the quilt, you're going to notice every imperfection. But once you're finished and you're enjoying your quilt after it's been washed or gifted away, the recipient will love it and all you'll see is the fabulous texture. Let's take a closer look at the finished quilting on my Modern Logs quilt. Don't you just love that combination of bold, colorful prints and yummy texture? If you would like to make a Modern Logs quilt just like this one, please visit shop.christaquilts.com for all of the fabric, the patterns, and supplies needed to make this quilt.